What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the OG family. Make sure y'all smash that like button, subscribe to my channel only if you want to. But look, my beautiful people, we got this 10 worst prisons in history. You feel me? Look, man, let's get this video right here to like 2,000 likes, and let's just hop straight into this video without further ado.
10 worst prisons in history. Number 10, Pitesti Prison. From 1949 until 1951, this Stalinist Romanian prison was home to an infamous experiment known as the Pitesti experiment. According to Open Democracy, this quote-unquote experiment was actually started by inmates of the prison itself, who had previously been jailed as anti-communist fascists. They formed the ODCC, or the Organisation of Prisoners with Communist Convictions, and went about re-educating other inmates in the most horrifying ways possible. This included torturing other inmates by making them stare at light bulbs, making them repeatedly headbutt each other, and even electrocution. They were also kept in squalid conditions on purpose and...
Look, man, I'll be real with you. Ain't nobody scaring me. Like, you're gonna have to just, like, get over with, kill me. You're not gonna force me to headbutt somebody and look at light bulbs. Like, what are we doing here?
And forced to perform humiliating tasks, such as baptisms involving sewage. This would then psychologically break other prisoners into joining the ODCC and renouncing their anti-communist tendencies. It's worth noting too that this was fully supported by the director of the prison himself. This brutality was eventually stopped in 1952 after a regime shift in the country, but by that point, over 700 prisoners had been through the horrific process, 30 of whom died. Number 9.
Hey, that's a high number for that.
Labelling Italy's Mamatine as a prison is a bit of a misnomer really, as it was more similar to a hybrid of a 12-foot deep underground dungeon and a sewage system. Built in the 7th century BC, the Mamatine was essentially 2 dark, dank cells stacked on top of each other. There was no natural light due to them being subterranean. In fact, the only way to get out or into the lower cell was via a hole in the ground of the upper one. Sallust, an ancient historian, described it as having a fearsome darkness and stench. Prisoners were often put into the lower chamber before execution. Failing that, they just left them there to rot and starve. It's worth reminding too that this complex was built within a sewage system. Legend has it that Saints Peter and Paul were actually held.
Bro, I'm telling you, I'm on my best behavior. I'm never breaking the law of nothing. Like, you're not putting me down there with some shit. Literally, you know, and no food.
There, but did not die as they were later crucified. For this reason, it's part of various pilgrimages since it's been converted into a church, memorialising the abject horror the prisoners of the Mamatine went through. Number 8. Ergo Prison, Mongolia. In 1916, naturalist Roy Chapman Andrews, future director of the American Museum of Natural History, travelled across Asia. He documented his experiences in his book Across Mongolian Plains in 1921, during which he mentions witnessing a prison he described as one of the worst in the world. In it, he mentioned seeing rooms full of coffins that were 4 feet long and 2 feet wide inside a prison in Ergo, Mongolia.
I'm not like, hold on. I'm in prison. I didn't come here to meet Dracula. You feel me? Like, y'all see them damn things? Hell no. Absolutely
Andrews
not.
explains that it was these tombs that were the prisoners' cells, which were designed so that the prisoners could not fully lay down or sit up comfortably. There was just a 6-inch wide hole in the coffins where they're given food. That is, to quote Andrews, if they remember to give them any. The prisoners were also handcuffed and their limbs would shrivel away due to lack of use. While the length of stay in these caskets varied, and would often be used purely to hold prisoners before they were executed, many of those incarcerated here unsurprisingly died in this horrific captivity. Number 7. Camp Sumpter Military Prison, Georgia. Created during the American Civil War in February of 1864, Camp Sumpter Military Prison was the largest Confederate prison in the whole conflict. Also known as Andersonville, Camp Sumpter was built to hold 10,000 people, but held over 30,000, which gives you a hint at the problems it faced.
Right.
The prison was supposed to be built rapidly, but the price of lumber was hugely inflated at the time, which meant it was never fully built properly. As a result, because there were no barracks to keep them in, instead the prisoners were open to the elements almost all of the time. Some of them had shanties made of blankets and bits of wood, whereas others dug holes in the ground for themselves. The camp was built around a creek with water running through it. However, this was soon contaminated with sewage, making the prisoners extremely vulnerable to disease. There was also very little in the way of food due to the Confederates losing supplies. and what food they had was of extremely low quality with next to no proper preparation. By the time the prison was closed at the end of the war,
Wow.
13,000 inmates had died as a result of these conditions, and its
Wow.
commander, Henry Vers, was executed for their murder.
Well, damn, you know what I'm saying? Hey, man, what do y'all think, man? Who is going to be number one? I have a good idea of what country that's going to be. I think it's fair enough to say United States.
Number 6. Karandaru Penitentiary.
From
Over
Mexico.
7,000 inmates lived
Mexico.
within the walls of Brazil's Karandaru Penitentiary, whereas there was only space for a third that number. As a result, there was one guard per every 100 prisoners, so things were bound to go wrong. As soon as the prisoners arrived, they are told that they need to rent their cells. Even those lucky enough to have left the prison are still apparently owed back payments for this. They actually tended to have a fair bit of freedom and control and could get whatever they want within the prison through illicit means, including mobile phones. There's even a prison within the prison called the Yellow, as those inside rarely see sunlight. However, it's most famous for the results of a riot after a game of soccer. 300 police officers stormed the jail and killed over 100 prisoners. Allegedly, this included prisoners who had surrendered or were trying to hide, often at close range. In 2014, 73 of the police officers were convicted, some of whom were sentenced to 156 years in jail.
That's
the
what they
prison
ass
was later
get.
demolished in
Yeah.
2002.
So you telling me these savages supposed to be police officers? It's crazy, man. Y'all just running up in here killing people that's trying to surrender? Like, hey, man, I ain't got nothing to do with this whole thing that's going on, bro. I'm just trying to survive. And y'all popping them?
Number 5.
Not
Devil's
surprising.
Island. 10 miles off the coast of French Guiana lay one of the deadliest and most notorious jails in the whole of the French penal colony, Île du Diable, or Devil's Island. Initially used as a leper colony, soon political prisoners were sent to the island too, during its use between 1852 and 1953. The prison was pretty much the only building on the whole island, surrounded by shark-infested waters, which were often the downfall of any seafaring would-be escapees. The convicts were forced to provide labour in all conditions while shackled. Some were even exposed to the elements all of the time, with no roof on their very small cells. This meant they were often attacked by animals on the island too, like vampire bats and rats. Solitary confinement wasn't much better though, as that was spent in complete darkness. Devil's Island saw 80,000 prisoners come and go, though the vast majority never got to leave the island, as thousands upon thousands died of various diseases, as well as the poor diet and labour conditions. To this day, the general public can visit other islands in the former penal colony, but venturing to Devil's Island is strictly taboo. Number 4.
I was thinking at first, like when they was describing it, you know what I'm saying? I'll pull up on that island right there. It's nothing. I could do my time on there, but when they was talking about them diseases, yeah, I'm cool.
4. The HMS Jersey. It's late 18th century in America, at the height of the War for Independence against the British, who were occupying New York City at the time. Prisoners of war or rebels had to be imprisoned by the British somewhere, as they numbered by the thousands. So the British used warships that were docked at shore to keep them on as prison ships. The worst of these was the ship nicknamed Hell, the HMS Jersey. It transpires that name is horrifyingly suitable. This ship kept more than 1,000 prisoners on board, where they were tortured, starved, and exposed to a deadly combination of diseases. This ship was meant for 400 sailors. The prisoners had nowhere to even sit or lie down. Since the vast majority of them were kept below deck, there was no sunlight and very little ventilation. In the summer, it was deathly warm. In the winter, unspeakably cold. Those on board the ship were eventually given a choice. One way out was to betray their country and join the British Army. But the many thousands that died clearly didn't take or weren't even given that choice, as the number of people who perished on board the Jersey and other prison ships was almost 3 times the amount of the patriots who died in armed combat.
Hey, look though, look. Let's be honest though. I'm pretty sure I know what y'all gonna do anyway. If you had those options, betray your country and keep dealing with that, what y'all doing? Shit, I'm out. I'm gonna be real with you, I'm out.
Number 3. Ho Lo Prison, Vietnam. Nicknamed the Hanoi Hilton during the Vietnam War, Ho Lo Prison was anything but luxury. A prison camp for American prisoners of war, the conditions at Ho Lo deteriorated rapidly with the increase of prisoners. The Vietnamese government used extreme methods of torture in order to extract military secrets from the US soldiers, including rope bindings, beatings, and solitary confinement. As well as this, prisoners' legs were often strapped into iron stocks that were left from the French colonial era of the prison. These were so tight that they often cut into the skin, causing lacerations and infection. They were also forced to defecate where they lay and left to rot with the rats and cockroaches. Prisoners were rarely fed, as starvation was used as a form of torture, and when they were fed, they were often given watery soups with feces and rocks. George McKnight, a 6'2" US soldier, was forced to lay in a 4-foot trench with his hands tied behind his back for 34 days, as punishment for trying to escape Hoa Lo. The Vietnamese government still denies the wrongdoings to these POWs to this very day. Number 2.
Wow.
Tamdur Prison, Syria.
Yo, they for real was on a whole nother level with it, trying to feed people some doo-doo.
Yeah. Built by the French in the 1930s, Tamdur Prison is located in the heart of the Syrian desert, and was the place that Syrian Prime Minister Hafez al-Assad sent thousands of political dissidents to be humiliated, tortured, and executed between 1971 and 2000. The prison is best known for the 1980 massacre. After a failed attempt at assassinating Assad, members of the Defense Brigade flew to Tamdur and their soldiers went from cell to cell, shooting prisoners with machine guns. An Amnesty International report estimates that up to 1,000 people were murdered in just minutes, most of which were supporters of the Muslim Brotherhood. Their bodies were dumped in mass graves outside the prison. Cells had windows covered with barbed wire, and prisoners were under permanent surveillance and not allowed to make eye contact with each other. On arrival, new inmates were thrown a reception party, where they were whipped mercilessly, forced into car tyres and beaten. Some prisoners never even made it through that reception. When inmates would cry out for medical help for other dying prisoners, they were told, "Only call us to collect bodies." Number 1.
What?
Holmesburg Prison, Philadelphia, USA.
I told y'all we was gonna be number 1, bro. We have to. You feel me? Like hey man, we so messed up in this country, man. Especially right now.
Holmesburg Prison was opened in 1896 to help relieve overcrowding at the nearby Mamatine Prison. Much like other entries in this list, this prison was no stranger to torture, corruption, and murder. In 1938, over half of the inmates went on hunger strike because the food was that bad. 25 of these were identified as leaders of the strike and were taken to a building called the Klondike, a narrow cell block lined with radiators and steam pipes which, in the peak of the August heatwave, reached nearly 200 degrees. Four of these men died with injuries pertaining to severe beatings and being boiled alive. The prison has also been the setting of many murders, including that of the warden and his deputy in 1973, and a bloody riot in 1970 in which prisoners were armed with meat cleavers and boning knives. During a lawsuit that followed, attention was drawn to the filthy and overcrowded conditions and severe beatings that inmates had to endure. As if that wasn't bad enough, prisoners were also subjected to medical experiments, where Dr. Albert Glickman exposed participants to herpes, staphylococcus, radioactive isotopes, chemicals that caused skin blistering, psychoactive drugs, and carcinogens. So those were the 10 worst.
And that's crazy, but look. Even though old buddy was experimenting on them like that, though, I feel like we shouldn't have been number 1. If that was all it was, I thought it was gonna be way worse than that. You feel me? That's crazy that I could even say that. We should have been like number 10. We shouldn't have been number 1 at all, you know? So I don't get that. Let me know if y'all agree with that or not. You feel me? Because these other prisons had people coming up in there, literally like the police officers murdering hundreds of thousands of people and, you know what I'm saying, straight shooting them. People that's trying to give up and everything, shackling people, feeding them feces and stuff. Like, what y'all think is the worst thing? But yeah, just let me know. Let me know what y'all want to see next. If you ain't follow my social media, follow my social medias right here. And I'll see you in the next video. Like I always say, spread love, because there's too much hate in this world. Love you guys, and I'm out though. Loud.
Hold up, she think I'm a flex on her when I roll up. From the toes up, when it comes to my drip, it's different.